Hi everyone, my name is Zach, and in this two-part video tutorial I show you how to fake a large-scale background forest in Blender. If you ever wanted to render a large-scale forest in Blender, then you may have troubles with the memory, that you don't have enough memory to render this using GPU or to handle the scene because there are just too many trees and too many polygons. Well, in this video I try to give you a solution which is pretty memory friendly. Here you can see an example image. And the very special thing here is that the sun shines from behind, all the trees are lit, and also this sci-fi object is lighting up the trees from the side. And you may guessed it, these are just alpha planes, so one simple face per tree. And I know alpha planes are nearly as old as computer graphics, but in this video I want to show you how to create some very special alpha planes. So let's take a look at the simple alpha plane. This is basically one face with an image on it, and the background from this image is transparent. In this animation I have simply rotated the sunlight, and as you can see, this tree looks really flat, and the shadow is also flat if the sun is shining from the side. And if the sun shines from behind, this is just black. And for these problems, I try to find some solutions. So the first solution is fixing the problem that the tree looks too flat. You can see the trunk, the branches, and also the top of the tree looks like it has real volume and it interacts with the sunlight. But we still have the problem that if the sun shines from behind, the tree is black and the flat shadow. So here's a solution with background lighting. You can see this nice rim light if the sun is shining from behind, and so the tree gets also lit if you have the sun from behind. But still we have this flat shadow if the sun is shining from the side, and certainly I also have a solution for this problem. This here is the final result of the tree which we will create in this video. And keep in mind, this tree should not be viewed this close. This is a tree you should use for a wide scale, large environment, and certainly the camera should not be too close to the trees. So I wanted to know if this technique is really better than simply using real geometry trees in Blender. All in all, I certainly can recommend using real trees because it's just looking perfect. In this scene here, certainly the lighting is not perfect, but we get an idea. For this scene I use one tree, which I copied using a particle system. And unfortunately, for using a particle system, we have to join all meshes together, and we can't use another particle system on the tree itself for the leaves, for example. And so I had to join everything. And if we're just rendering the tree with a particle system, this is pretty fast. But if we join everything, this tree had 9 million polygons. So this was not really optimized. But anyway, I don't have this super power graphics card, so I had to render this using CPU. With 1000 trees, you can see it uses 3 gig of RAM. Then I converted this tree into my method. Certainly the lighting looks a little bit different, but as you can see, I have rendered this using GPU in 1 minute and 40 seconds, and it only took 55 megabytes of RAM. This is a huge difference. Unfortunately, in general, cycles can't render alpha planes really fast, but if you're far away with the camera, this should work pretty well. Alright, step number 1. We need to create a rendering with a transparent background we can map onto our plane. So you may ask yourself, okay, I also can make a photo of a tree and cut it out and put it on the plane. But no, in this method we need a 3D tree, and why you will see later. For creating a tree you can use the free Blender add-on Sapling, which is already in Blender. You just need to enable it in the user preferences, or you download some trees from the Blender Market, BlendSwap, or any other 3D model website. But in my case I will use the paid add-on the Growth 3D. Check out the website thegrowth3d.com, and here you can buy this add-on. It's not really cheap, it costs 109 euros, and you also have to purchase the tricks here separately for different types of trees, but I really can recommend this add-on, and it's worth every euro because it's creating super realistic trees in no time. But let the add-on speak for itself. Let's delete the cube here and the lamp, move the camera to another layer, and down here I already pasted this tricks here for a linden tree, and we will grow a linden tree in just a few seconds. So if you have installed the add-on, simply press Shift A, mesh the growth. I use version 4a in this case. And then down here in the operator panel, you have all the settings, and you can see you have a lot of settings, but we won't cover anything of this in this tutorial because we simply use a preset and it will just look awesome. So let's take this apical trick from the linden tree and also the lateral trick. And then you can see we have already a simple little trick here. And now let's grow the tree. So first of all, under quick start, I use the linden tree. And now everything I need to do is hit the grow button, and then it will grow for 4 years. You can also change this value. So I hit grow and grow and grow, and you can see that this tree is growing. Also, if you don't like the shape, you can press reset and grow again, and then the tree will look different, as you can see. So let's grow it for a few more years. Certainly, the larger the tree is, the longer it takes to calculate. So now we have this tree, 20 years old, 6 meters high, and over 4,000 branches. And for the forest we want to create, it's nice if we can see the trunk good. So I will cut this branch off. I simply hit this shape button after painting a grease pencil line, and then you can see the branch is away. So this should be our tree we will use in this tutorial. And the nice thing, the tricks already have a nice cycles shader, so we don't need to set up anything there. We just have to load in a texture for the trunk and the branches, but the nice thing is it's already UV unwrapped. So I simply need to select this, go to material, you see we have already a material, surface, use nodes. Behind color I click on this button, click on image, texture, open. And the nice thing with this add-on, you also get a nice library of bark textures. So I will use this linden tree, open image, and that's it. Certainly you can set up bump maps and so on, but in this case we don't need this. Now let's set up our scene. First of all, I add a plane for a ground, because I want that the tree will receive some shadow from the ground so that the lower part of the tree is darker. And on this ground I will add a simple diffuse material with a dark green brownish color. And I don't want to see this ground in the final rendering, so I go to Object, Cycle Setting and deactivate Camera. Then this ground is still there and it will interact with the objects, but the camera can't see it, so it will be simply invisible. Then on the other side we need an area lamp. Put it above the tree, scale it up, and this should mimic the lighting which comes from the sky, so the upper part of this tree will be lit from above. And then we can see this nice volume of the tree even better. Little side note, I am using Filmic Blender here with base contrast or medium high contrast, and I don't want to explain what this is. Take a look in the video description, there are some links to tutorials and more information. This is something you should really check out, and it's really important for creating more realistic renders. Alright, now I switch to the lamp settings and set the strength to 2000, and the background of the scene I set to white and put the strength up to 2. Now the next thing we do, we adjust the render settings. I want to render this using GPU. I want to have a square format, so I use 2048 by 2048 and 100%. You also can render this with 1024 to 1024. It's also fine if you don't want to have this high resolution. Then, very important, under film we enable transparent, so the background of our rendering will be transparent. And under sampling I set the render samples to 64. We don't need that high render samples because in the final image the trees will be very small, so you don't see if there's any noise or not. Now I select the trunk, go to Object, and under Relations I set the path index to 1. And under the render layers passes I enable Object Index. And this will create a black and white mask where the trunk and the branches are white and the rest of the image is black. And we will use this as mask in our material later on for our alpha plane. So if you don't know what this should be right now, don't worry, you will know in a few minutes. So now we only need to set up our camera and then we can render this image. So I enable the layer with the camera. With Alt-R and Alt-G I reset the rotation and position. Now I take a look from the side, rotate this 90 degrees, place it in front of the tree, go to the camera settings, and the lens I set to orthographic, so we don't have a perspective distortion in this image. And with this orthographic scale we can zoom in a bit. And with G I position the camera in a way that the trunk and the lower part of the camera are aligning, so that there's no space between the border of the image and the trunk. And with Ctrl B I set the render border so that I only include the tree itself. Alright, now let's hit Shift Z to take a short look how this looks like. And as you can see up here it's bright. And down here we have a darker area. So just perfect. Alright, that's everything we need to do. Now we can save this Blender file and reuse this later. So simply delete the tree, grow a new tree, adjust the camera a little bit, and then you can render other trees. So you simply need to set up this Blender file once and then you can reuse this for other trees. Alright, now let's render this image. Alright, the rendering is done. Here's our final tree. So let's hit F3 to save this. And let's save this under tree, linden, col for color. And here we use RGBA. This is important so that we also have the alpha channel, the transparent background. And I'm using PNGs here. And now let's hit save as image. And then you maybe remember we set up this object index. So I click down here and choose index OB. And now you can see we only have this white trunk and everything else is masked. But we don't need a transparent background in this case. So I hit F3 and simply use BW. This stands for black and white. And we save this as mask, tree linden mask. Hit save. And now we need two other things. In order that we get this nice lighting effect, we need a normal map from this tree. And this we can do pretty simple. I switch to the Blender render and under the render settings, under anti-aliasing, I set this to 16 and full sample. And pretty simple, in the properties menu, under display I set this to only render, so all the helping objects like the grid and so on will be disabled. And also under shading I enable matte cap, and here I choose this normal map matte cap. For this I disable this filmic blender, and now I simply hit this OpenGL render button. And in just a few seconds we have our normal map. And if you want to have a different background, we also can change the shading under the render settings to be transparent. Now I render this again. And then you can see we also have this transparent background. Or if we don't want to save this, then we have this simple black background. So I hit F3. Here we simply choose RGB, and this we name NOR. Tree Linden NOR stands for normal map. So, but with this normal map, we just have the nice lighting effects for the trunk and the branches, but we want to have this volume effect. And for this, we need another normal map. I go to another layer, add a simple cube, scale it up so that it fits in this camera perspective. And now I simply add smooth shading. And now we have this smooth shaded cube with this normal map matcap. And now you can see we have this very smooth shading, and this will add the nice shading effect for our trees. So simply hit this OpenGL render button again, and then F3, and this we can call volume NOR, because this one normal map we can use for all the trees we are creating. RGB. So and this is everything you need. Certainly this one thing you can delete, because this we don't need to create again. But if you want to add another tree, you simply delete this tree, grow a new tree. You can also grow other trees with other tricks and so on, and then do the whole process again. So you don't need to set up the whole blend file again, but certainly you have to render your new tree, and always take care that you enable this path index for your new trees. Alright, now let's map the image we've just created onto a plane. So let's delete some stuff here, move the camera over here, collapse the timeline, and now I add a simple plane. Switch to edit mode, move it one Blender unit to the side. And now we simply can rotate this in object mode, so the center point is now down here, and this is very important if we want to create a particle system so that the trees are always standing on the ground. Now with Control A I apply the rotation, and now everything is back normal. Now let's add a simple plane as ground. Let's call this linden tree, and we add a simple sun lamp. Also here I am using Filmic Blender with medium high contrast, and now let's set up the material. Now I split the window, and up here I am switching to the node editor, and here we will create the shader for our alpha plane. Very important that all the things we are doing are working fine. We have to look at our face from the front side. So every face has a front side and a back side. If I'm in edit mode, I can enable the normals. And then we can see this little line here pointing in one direction, and this is basically the front side of the face. So it's important that we are looking from this side on this face here. Now this plane is selected, shader nodes are enabled. Now let's add a new material, call this linden tree, and now I simply drag and drop my rendered images from an external folder into Blender. And as you can see, this will automatically generate this image texture nodes. Now let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see the name of the textures. And very important for the normal maps, we have to switch color to non-color data. And also that the image is mapped nicely onto this plane, we have to go to the edit mode, press U unwrap. So if I connect the linden color with the diffuse shader and we render this, we can see the color of this tree on the plane. But you can see the background is still black. That means we have to add a mix shader, a transparent shader, and now we have to define what part of the image should be transparent, and for that we have this alpha channel output. We can see here it's just a black and white image, And if we are choosing this as FAC input here, then all the white parts will use the lower input of the shader and all the black parts will use the upper input. So that means all the black parts will be using this transparent shader and all the white parts are using this diffuse shader. And now we have the basic standard alpha plane. Certainly if you have diffuse lighting in your scene, this could also work if you're now creating a large scale forest. But we want to make this whole thing a little bit more interesting. So let's split the window that we can change the rotation of the lamp from time to time. And maybe we change this a little bit. Also, I increase the strength of the sunlight so we can see the whole thing better. So let's start with the normal map. Down here we have the normal of the tree and the volume normal. And now we have to combine these two normal maps. For this we simply add a color, mix RGB. Here we set the blending type to overlay, and then we adding these two inputs, can increase the factor, and then you can see we have now one image. Then we have to add a vector normal map and use the color output for the color input of this normal map, and then we connect the normal output to the normal input of the diffuse shader. By the way, I'm using the Node Wrangler add-on for quickly previewing nodes while holding down Shift Control and then left click on a node, and then you can see what the node tree does until this selected node. So now we have the basic settings. If I'm now rotating the sun and zoom in a little bit closer, you can see how this is interacting with the light, but it's still a little bit weak. So I increase the strength of the normal map to 4. And now if I'm rotating the sun, you can see this is looking pretty nice. It really seems that the sun is shining from the side onto this tree. So the next thing we want to create is the backlighting. That means if the sun is shining from the back, that we have this nice rim light effect. For that, we adding a few nodes. First of all, we are using the translucent shader. So behind the diffuse shader, I add an add shader and a translucent shader. So now the light that is coming through the tree is just white, and that we can define using this color. And if I now using the standard color of the tree, you can see the tree from the backside is just bright. And we don't want the whole tree to be bright, just the upper part here. So and for this I add an input texture coordinate node, a mapping node, and texture a gradient texture node. The texture coordinate I set to generated, and mapping we just leave as it is for now. And now let's take a look what this does. So right now we can't see much. Now let's change the gradient type to spherical. And now you can see the spherical shape on this object, but the position is a little bit odd. So let's change the values. In this case, I need to change the location of the Y direction. And also I want this shape to be a little bit squashed. So we need to change the scale value. And it could be that you have to change other values depending on the rotation of your object. So let's change this value to negative 0.75, and then we have what we want. And we are using the generated input because now if I'm scaling this also in edit mode or in object mode, you can see that this also gets scaled. So the image we are creating here should be the color input for our translucent shader. That means for this one. And now we just have this black and white sphere here. That means we need to add the color somehow. And for that, I first of all add a converter color ramp, then a color mix RGB node. And for the upper part, we use our standard color as input. And for the lower part, we take this spherical shape. Then we have this here. And in this stadium, we need the tree to be black and white. That means we go to converter RGB to BW. This converts color to black and white, as you can see. And up here we choose subtract. And now you can see the sphere is now dark and we just see the leaves up here. We can set this to 1, then this effect is even stronger. And with this color ramp, we can adjust the sphere. And if I enable this, you can see how this is changing. So we just have a smaller rim light here. Certainly you also can change the position of the sphere to change this effect on the tree. And now we need our color back. That means we're adding another mix RGB node, using this as mix factor, the black and white image. And now let's take the original color, and the rest should be black. That means from this image, this we're using as mask. All the white parts are using now the lower input of this mix node, and all the black parts the upper, which is also black. And then we have this nice color. And if I now put this into our translucent shader and see what this does, you can see we have this nice rim light effect if the sun is shining from behind. If this rim light effect is too strong, you simply duplicate this last mix RGB node, put in the color as color 1, set the lower color to be black, and now let's choose this as input. And now if I'm changing this value here, we can change the strength. Basically we are mixing black color into this image here. So simply put this to 0.5, and now we have this nice rim light effect. Now we have this whole bunch of nodes up here, so let's adding a layout frame node, select all these, left click into this node, and now we have this frame around these nodes, so the whole thing is a little bit more clear. Also we can name this frame, simply select it up here under label. We can set this to be translucent, and also you can change the label size down here. Now we know that all these nodes are important for the translucent effect. If you like, you also can add this to here, then it's even more clear. So now we have one problem with this backlighting. If I rotate the sun, we can see there is no change, except it's getting darker the lower the angle of the sun is. But we want the same effect like for the front, that this backlighting also interacts with the rotation of the sun. So, and for that we certainly also need a normal map. But if I choose this standard normal map here, connect this with here, and disable the ground, you can see that everything is inverted. That means the sun needs to shine from below. And also, if I'm moving this in a way that the sun is shining from the right side, you can see the left side is brighter. So we need to flip our normal map. And for that we cannot simply flip the color. If I'm doing this, color invert, and use this inverted normal map, then we still don't have the result that we want. You can see nothing really is happening here. So that the whole thing is working right, we need to flip the normal map in only 2 axes. Let's add a converter, separate RGB. Now let's separate the colors, red, green and blue, because the normal map consists out of red, green and blue. And let's take a look. Red, you can see, is for the left-right lighting, green for the top and bottom lighting. And these two we need to invert. So we simply adding a color invert, place it here and here. Now the 2 colors are inverted, and the blue channel we leave as it is. And now we need to combine these colors again. So we adding a converter, combine RGB. Now let's combine this again, and the blue channel keeps as it is. Let's take this as color input, and now you will see, depending on the angle of the sun, this will light up the right or the left side. It took me quite a while to figure out how to do this, how to flip the whole thing, but here you have the answer. And sorry if my explanation is not that accurate with all this normal stuff. But anyway, now let's add a layout frame node and put all the normal stuff in here. Let's name this normal map, increase the label size, and now we have all this normal map stuff. Certainly, if we are creating the forest, we will duplicate this tree using a particle system, so we don't need 100 variations of this tree. But if we are duplicating this tree, certainly all the duplicates are just looking the same. Certainly we can change the scaling, but it would also be nice if the color is a little bit different on all the trees. And for that we adding a random color effect so that every tree has automatically a different color. Alright, and for that we will use our mask, as you will see in a second. So let's make some space here. And the first thing we need is a color mix RGB and color RGB curves 2 times. Now we take our standard color, put it into the curves and mix both together using the mix node. Now let's see what this is doing. Now up here I can, for example, change the red tones or the green tones of this color, and down here I add a little bit more blue, take some red away. So now we have some pretty strong different colors, and with this mix RGB node we can mix these 2 colors together. And we want that every tree has a different random mix variation of these 2 colors. And for that I add an input object info node, and here we have this nice random output. So we connect this to this vector, and now you can see that the colors of all the trees are different. If I connect everything right, you can see it pretty well. Certainly I have pretty strong colors right now. I won't overdo it, but with this simple technique you can easily change the whole forest to look like a fall forest or a spring forest and so on. So it's pretty easy to change. But there's still one problem. If I zoom in, change the color to be red, you can see also the trunk is colored in red now. And we want to exclude the trunk from these color variations. And for that we use the mask here. You can see I already had imported the mask at the beginning. And now let's duplicate this mix RGB node, put it behind. And now we use this mask color as mix vector. And now you can see that we only can see the leaves and the trunk is now white. And now we simply use the original color of our tree and put it in the lower input. And as you can see now we have our standard trunk here. So if I change the color to be extremely red, you can see that the trunk always looks the same. And this we connect with the diffuse shader, and also we want that the color of the translucent effect has the same colors we have here. So we basically need to connect all the things from this here to this. So, and now this also should work. And then I add another frame node. Let's call this random color, label size 40. And now we have everything we need for a nice alpha plane tree. So this is basically this setup for the trees. Certainly if you want to add more trees, you simply have to duplicate this, duplicate the material, and then simply replace the different textures, and then everything works perfectly fine. So you don't have to create the whole material again and again. Yeah, that's it with part 1 of this tutorial. I hope you liked it and learned a few things, and if so, tell your friends about it and share this video. Also, you can get some exclusive tutorials on my Gumroad page, link in the video description. And also you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, blah blah blah. The links you find in the video description. And also I have a newsletter if you want to have my latest news directly to your inbox. Check out the video description. In the next video I will show you how to get rid of the flat shadow and how to set up the particle system to create the forest. Thanks for watching and see you in part 2.